Hi, everybody. Scarlet Letter Group, it's time for Chapter 5. Now, we notice at the beginning of Chapter 5, Hester Prynne has left the prison. And it says at the very first that perhaps there was more real torture in her first unattended footsteps from the threshold of the prison than even in the procession and the spectacle that have been described. What does that mean? What is that telling us about Hester leaving? Why is this so much torture for her to leave the prison? I want you to stop and talk about that in your group just a little bit. Hit pause. Okay, hope you're back. All right, it goes on then to tell us about what Hester decides to do for a living. And we know based on Hester's Scarlet Letter A that she's very talented with a needle and thread. And therefore she becomes a seamstress in order to create beautiful garments for people. And we find out that she would create anything from heads of state to the intricate details of a white veil for a bride to something for a baby. And even though this is a sinful woman that has done this, everybody wants to look their best. They always want to look wonderful. And Hester is the only one who seems to be able to have that talent in the village. So she does pretty well for herself. It does say that she does not flaunt her beauty. She wears very simple, very coarse, gray, dark gowns. Why? Why is it that she's in tune with the world? We learn that in this chapter. But she chooses to dress very modestly, very humbly. Why? What does that tell us about her? Why does she not want to call attention to herself? Discuss that. Hit pause. Okay, on page 73 in my book, it says, Hester could no longer borrow from the future to help her through the present grief. Tomorrow would bring its own trial. What trials is she talking about? What trials does she go through on a day-to-day visit? She said throughout them all, giving up her individuality, she would become the general symbol at which a preacher or a moralist might point and might vilify, that embodied their images of women's frailty and sinful nature. Remember, Hester Prynne is the adulteress. We still don't know who the father is. She's never mentioned the father. So she is taking on the sin of two people upon herself and her child. And so everywhere she walks in town, everywhere she goes, she's stared at as that woman. Now, they want to wear her clothes, they want to look beautiful, but they also use her as an example to others. How would you feel, being Hester and knowing that everywhere you go, people are speaking about you? Not that paranoid, I think they're talking about me. She was literally, the sermons would be about her. People would stop in the street and talk very openly about what a sinful and horrible woman Hester was. Put yourself in her shoes for a minute. How would you feel? Do we do this today? Does this still happen to people today? Talk amongst yourself for just a minute. Now it goes on to say that she could have gone anywhere. She really could have. She could have gone anywhere. But she chooses not to. She stays. Now, part of it, I think, is because look at your time period. It's not easy just to move a town over or whatever, and she knows that sin's going to follow her anywhere. But what do you think? Did she make the right decision for her and Pearl? What decision would you have made in her position? If you knew, we're in a small community, if everybody was speaking bad about you and pointing you out, would you have the strength to stay and face it day after day? And notice I did say strength. She had to be a strong woman. It is not for the faint of heart to live someplace where you are constantly ridiculed. And she was. She was ridiculed day after day after day. But she chooses to stay. Why do you think that is? Why did she choose to stay in that village, instead of going a village over, instead of going back to England where she remembers her family? Why does she choose to stay in that village? What do you think? Talking? Hit pause. Now, I touched on briefly earlier, and I'm on the top of page 77 now. I touched earlier on the fact that Hester chooses to wear clothes that are very humble, they're very coarse, they're very gray. And I asked you to talk about what that says about Hester. Now look on page 77 at the clothes she designs for her daughter, for Pearl. Why does she design such beautiful clothes for Pearl? Any money she makes goes to keep the house running, and if there's any extra, it goes to design beautiful gowns for Pearl. Why would she do that? What does that tell us about Hester? Back? All right. Now, she enjoys embroidery. She enjoys creating things. She enjoys designing. But at the bottom of page 77, it says that this could have been an act of expression. You know, all of what she's creating, everything she built, or the outfits that she creates. And she says, like all other joys, she rejected it as sin. Why would this occupation, it is her occupation, this career that she has chosen, she enjoys it, so she sees it as sinful? Why is that? I want you to talk into your groups how doing something she loves doing, she constitutes as sin. Why is that? Why is that a big deal? Go ahead and talk in your groups for a minute. At the bottom of 77 then, it says, with her native energy of character and rare capacity, it cannot entirely cast her off, although it had set a mark upon her more intolerable to a woman's heart than that which branded the brow of Cain. In all her intercourse with society, however, there was nothing that made her feel as if she belonged to it. Every gesture, every word, even the silence of those whom she came in contact, implied and often expressed that she was banished. Put yourself in Hester's shoes for a minute. She is utterly alone. Except for Pearl, who we meet in chapter 6. She's by herself. What does that tell us about her? How would you feel if you were Hester during this time, knowing that you are constantly by yourself? There's literally nobody there to talk to. Now I want you to take that another step and look around today as you walk the halls of our high school. Look for those people whose heads are down, who don't ever seem to walk with anybody else, and ask yourself why. And then ask yourself how you would feel in their position. I see them standing on post all the time. They're not outsiders, but they're treated as outsiders. I don't see them walking with friends. Their heads are down. You can tell they're sad. We're quick to judge the Puritanistic society for banishing Hester for a sin. But do we do the same thing in our own hallways? Do we banish some of those students who are different than we are? Who may have their own letter that they bear, their own cross that they bear? And what do we need to do about it? How do we fix that? I want you to really talk about that in your group and think about those people, those students that you see in the hallways that are by themselves day after day. Now, I'm not saying they committed a sin like Hester. No. But I am saying we kind of banish them like the Puritans banished Hester. How do we fix that? That's my challenge to you today. How do you fix that? Discuss in your group for a minute. It goes on to say on the bottom of 78 that her heart, it grew accustomed to all the drops of bitterness that society would throw. It says women can concoct a poison from ordinary trifles and sometimes also coarser expression that fell upon the sufferer's defenseless breast like a rough blow on an ulcerated wound. And she never responded to these attacks except for maybe a blush. What is Hawthorne telling us? What are the women in the town doing to Hester? I want you to talk about that for a minute. And then again, I want you to apply it to today. Those mean little things that you say, or ghosting somebody on Snapchat or Instagram. How does that apply to today? And who do we do that to today? Because ladies, like it or not, we can be pretty nasty. And we know how to be nasty in a manipulative way. Has it changed since Hawthorne wrote the Scarlet Letter? Talk about that for a brief minute, please. Okay, he goes on to say, he talks about how the society is reacting to Hester and what they do to Hester. But Hawthorne also says that you would have thought her heart would grow more callous. And this is on page 79. Her heart would grow more callous, but instead it seemed to grow more sensitive. What does he mean by that? Number one, I want you to talk in your groups. What does that mean? And number two, I want you to look at why it would be more sensitive. What happens when you are ostracized and belittled day after day after day after day? Do you grow callous? Or does that start to become the mantra that you say to yourself? And if we're the ones creating that mantra in somebody else's head, what does that say about us as a society, us as individuals? Discuss this. It says on 79 that Hester Prynne had always had this dreadful agony in feeling of a human eye upon the token. It never grew callous. It only seemed to go more sensitive with daily torture. We may not all wear a scarlet A, but I guarantee you have classmates in your class right now. We have people in this school who have that letter that they wear upon themselves that does grow more sensitive with torture every day. How do we fix that? We can take Hawthorne's lessons. We don't have to look at it verbatim, word for word, that, well, she was just an adulteress and so she slept with a guy and had a baby, no big deal. Do we do the same thing now? Maybe not in regards to adultery. How do we judge people now? How do Hawthorne's words still ring true today, and how do we fix it? That's the challenge, is the fixing part. Okay, at the very end of chapter 5, it talks about how she kind of has this empathy. If you look on page 80, she said it gave her a sympathetic knowledge of hidden sin in other hearts. This is empathy. When she looks at somebody, even a pastor, she'll walk by and she'll realize, oh, they have sin hidden in them. And she kind of questions, what is this dark thing that's coming up? Well, I don't know about you, but I think sometimes when we've done something wrong, and sometimes when we've had to walk a hard road or we've gone through a rough patch in our life, it helps to make us a little bit more sensitive to others around us and the needs they're facing and the trials they're having and the tribulations they are going through. And I think the one good thing that we can say about the Scarlet Letter for Hester, except she has nobody to share it with, is that she is more empathetic to those people. If they would reach out, they would find a true friend in Hester Prynne, because she understands those trials. She understands those tribulations. Think about it. Hard times that you yourself have gone through. Has that helped to waken you up to the needs of others around you? And if not, how do we make it wake us up to the needs of others around us? All right, I'll be back to discuss chapter 6.